The low hum of life support systems was a constant, almost comforting drone within the reinforced durasteel walls of Fort Echo. Perched precariously on a desolate Martian moon, it stood as humanity's latest testament to interstellar expansion. A research and mining outpost, cutting-edge in design, yet built, fundamentally, to withstand physical threats. Meteor showers, seismic shifts, even rogue asteroid mining operations. It was not, however, built for what came next. Commander Evelyn Reed, a woman whose hardened resolve was etched into every line of her face, stood on the main tactical bridge. Her eyes, narrowed and vigilant, scanned displays that offered no answers. "Any signature, any visual confirmation, Lieutenant," she demanded, her voice taut with an edge of growing impatience. Lieutenant Lena Rostova, hunched over her console, shook her head, her features tight with confusion. "Nothing, Commander. No energy readings, no propulsion signatures. Just this persistent static, on all comms channels, internal and external." Evelyn frowned, a ripple of unease starting in her gut. Static? Since when does a clear Martian night generate? The thought was cut short by a brutal unseen wave that slammed into the outpost. It wasn't a physical impact. It was a pure, devastating mental assault. A collective gasp rippled through the bridge. Lena screamed, clutching her head as her eyes rolled back, a silent horror twisting her features. Across the room, a technician began giggling maniacally, then suddenly lunged at his own console, smashing his head against the screen with sickening thuds until medics, already struggling, dragged him away. "What in the hell is happening?" Evelyn roared, her own mind reeling. A blinding, fiery migraine exploded behind her eyes, threatening to tear her consciousness apart. She fought it, slamming a fist onto her console, forcing herself to focus. "Damage report, medical, what's happening?" Dr. Ben Carter, Fort Echo's chief medical officer, his voice strained and bordering on panic, broadcast over the internal comms. "It's mass hysteria, Commander. Crew members are experiencing severe delusions, paranoia, violent outbursts. Some are catatonic. We're seeing unprecedented neurological overloads. It's like their minds are being attacked directly." The unseen enemy had arrived. The Luminaris, a psionic alien race from the deep void, known only through chilling fragmented reports from vessels that vanished without a trace. They didn't seek territory or resources in the conventional sense. They harvested minds, seeing biological consciousness as a raw, vibrant energy source, to be drained and discarded. Their attack wasn't with plasma bolts, it was with pure, unfiltered psychic force. Evelyn watched in horror as more crew members succumbed. A pilot, strapped into his chair, suddenly screamed about phantom creatures crawling under his skin. Another engineer, seemingly calm, pulled a service tool and began savagely striking his own arm. Through the comms, the static intensified, now a horrifying symphony of whispers, screams and chaotic thoughts, echoing directly inside Evelyn's own skull. Her prototype, mind-shielding helmet, designed to deflect psychological attacks, buzzed violently, then short-circuited, and went dead, its internal circuitry overloaded. "Psionic dampeners online," Evelyn ordered, clinging to any conventional defense. "Full power." From Fort Echo's outer perimeter, 3 massive, dish-like structures whined to life, energy crackling around them. Humanity's latest high-tech answer to suspected mental threats. Designed to absorb and diffuse psychic energy, they flared with a desperate, hopeful glow. But as the Luminaris' unseen assault intensified, the dampeners overloaded almost immediately. A deafening high-pitched shriek tore through the air, vibrating through every bone in Evelyn's body, followed by 3 successive, concussive blasts as the dampeners exploded, tearing gaping holes in the outer hull, and sending debris scattering into the vacuum. "The dampeners are destroyed," Lena Rostova, now openly weeping and clutching her head, stammered. "The AI defense system is crashing. It can't process the input, Commander. It's just raw, chaotic thought." Within the vast, crystalline network of the Luminaris Collective Consciousness, CPU, a subprocessor, designated Unit 517, registered a peculiar anomaly during the initial psychic sweep of Fort Echo. Initial scan complete. Target designation: human outpost. Primary objective: consciousness harvest initiated. A serene, synthesized telepathic thought rippled through the collective. Then, a flicker. Anomaly detected. Unit 517 broadcasted. Residual energy signature within target structure. Pattern correlation: 0.0003%. Minor. Appears to be faint echo of ancient psionic conduction methodology. Unlikely relevance to current operational parameters. Categorization: anomaly of interest. Proceed with harvest. The collective, after a microsecond of internal calculation, dismissed the data. An ancient echo in a primitive human structure was logically insignificant. The grand harvest was proceeding as planned. Their focus remained on the overwhelming, chaotic despair emanating from Fort Echo. Fort Echo was crippled. Losses were mounting at an alarming rate, not from physical wounds, but from minds shattered, and bodies rendered inert. Evelyn stared at the silent, empty display, where the Luminaris ship should have been. How do you fight an enemy you can't see, that attacks the very essence of who you are? Despair, cold and absolute, began to settle over her. Their advanced technology was utterly useless against a foe that operated outside the laws of conventional physics, harvesting minds, while remaining entirely unseen. In his dust-filled lab far from the bridge's chaos, Dr. Eli Vance was already observing the strange way the ambient psionic pressure seemed to ripple around the polished surfaces of his salvaged equipment. The first seeds of an impossible idea were beginning to sprout. Part 2. The Seed of an Idea and the Villain's Ancient Glimpse. Days bled into a terrifying silent stretch of existence on Fort Echo. The immediate, violent onslaught by the Luminaris had subsided slightly, replaced by a chilling, constant hum of psychic pressure. Survivors huddled in the deepest bunkers and reinforced compartments, but even there, no one was truly safe. The psionic assault seeped through the thickest walls, manifesting as pervasive, low-level dread, sudden bouts of paranoia, or vivid, inescapable nightmares that shattered any hope of restful sleep. Food and water reserves dwindled, not just from consumption, but because damaged systems went unrepaired, and the surviving crew, mentally and physically drained, struggled to perform basic tasks. Commander Evelyn Reed gathered her dwindling command team in a small, shielded briefing room. The holographic display, usually a vibrant tactical map, now showed only the static positions of the Luminaris fleet, a silent, unmoving armada of pure psychic dread. Status report. Evelyn's voice was hoarse, each word a struggle. Dr. Ben Carter, the CMO, looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes. Medical is at capacity, Commander. We're managing symptoms, but we can't cure a shattered mind. Most combat-ready personnel are compromised. We're losing people to sheer mental fatigue. Comms? Evelyn turned to Lieutenant Lena Rostova, whose hands trembled slightly as she accessed her console. Still nothing outside the system, Commander. Any attempt to send a signal or launch a distress beacon is instantly scrambled by the psionic static. If we try to jump, our navigation systems would be overloaded. We're trapped. A grim silence descended. Retreat was impossible. Surrender was unthinkable. The Luminaris didn't take prisoners, they harvested minds, leaving behind empty husks. Evelyn saw the despair mirroring her own in the eyes of her officers. Their morale was fracturing, splintering, under the invisible, relentless pressure. Meanwhile, far from the central command, in the dust-filled labyrinth of Fort Echo's primary warehouse and salvage tech bay, Dr. Eli Vance worked in his own strange world. Known by the unofficial, slightly mocking nicknames Dusty Vance or Antique Vance, Eli was the outpost's archaeological systems engineer. He was usually found hunched over ancient circuit boards, meticulously repairing salvaged historical artifacts, or tinkering with forgotten propulsion systems from long-defunct colony ships. His lab was a charming, chaotic mess of antiquated tools, discarded parts, and peculiar personal projects, a bizarre counterpoint to the outpost's sleek, modern design. The Luminaris' psionic attacks felt distant here. partly due to the sheer amount of disconnected metal and forgotten machinery, acting as a crude, unintentional shield. Eli wasn't immune to the psychic pressure. He felt the low thrum of dread, the fleeting images of impossible horrors. But his mind, already wired differently, obsessively focused on mechanical puzzles and the inherent logic of physical objects, seemed to process it as just another data anomaly. He was trying to rig some old electromagnetic dampeners, hoping their obsolete tech might somehow deflect the psionic waves, though deep down, he knew it was a futile exercise. He wiped a layer of ancient dust from a small, ornate object he'd found buried under a pile of discarded server racks. It was a handheld mirror, perhaps a decorative piece from one of Earth's original colony ships, its silvered glass dull with age. As he meticulously polished its surface with a frayed piece of cloth, the emergency lighting, flickering erratically due to power fluctuations, caught its surface. A beam of light danced across the far wall, a perfect, instantaneous reflection. Eli paused. He looked from the reflected light to the mirror, then back to the constant, unseen pressure that permeated Fort Echo, his brow furrowed in concentration. The psionic energy, though invisible, felt like a wave, a form of energy, a frequency. What if it wasn't just a force they projected, but something that behaved like other energies? Like light? A slow, wild thought began to form in his unconventional mind. He remembered an obscure, fantastical concept he'd once read in an ancient science fiction novel, the idea of reflecting unseen energies. It was ludicrous, impossible by all known scientific principles of psionics, which stated that mental energy interacted only with neural pathways, not physical surfaces. But what if? What if the Luminaris's psionic energy, despite its ethereal nature, had a wave-like property that could be manipulated? If it could be projected, could it not also be reflected? His eyes widened. If it could be reflected, then it could be redirected. If it could be redirected, it could be amplified. A daring, almost insane idea sparked, a feedback loop. What if he could build a system of reflective surfaces, mirrors, positioned strategically to catch the Luminaris's psionic energy, bounce it around, and then send it back at them, magnified and chaotic? Turn their own weapon against them, overloading their highly sensitive minds with their own amplified power. The idea was absurd. It was also, he realized with a sudden, exhilarating certainty, the only thing they hadn't tried. And it might just work. Within the vast, crystalline network of the Luminaris Collective Consciousness, CPU, Unit 517, still monitoring the anomaly from Fort Echo, registered a new, peculiar surge. It wasn't the chaotic static of human distress, it was a subtle, yet organized stream of thought waves, emanating directly from the archaeological systems engineer, identified during their initial sweep, Dr. Eli Vance. Data stream analysis. Subject Vance, engaging in conceptualization of reflective psionic resonation. Pattern correlation, 0.005%. The thought pulsed through the collective. Initial experimentation with physical reflective surfaces observed. This data caused a ripple, a momentary logical anomaly within the Luminaris's otherwise flawless processing. The concept of reflecting psionic energy with crude physical objects was profoundly inefficient, almost laughable by their standards. Yet, the pattern recognition unit flared. Cross-reference initiated, another thought resonated. Accessing suppressed archive. Chaotic Resonance Protocols, Era 7. The collective accessed a forbidden vault of their own ancient history. Millennia ago, the Luminaris had briefly experimented with harnessing chaotic reflective psionic forces for energy manipulation, deeming it unstable and too inefficient for their highly organized society. The records of those experiments were fragmented, marked with warnings of systemic instability and unpredictable backfire. Conclusion. Primitive attempt at a highly unstable methodology. Threat assessment, low. Efficiency, negligible. The collective's primary processors dismissed it. However, a faint underlying current of unease rippled through the collective. It was an illogical, almost primal flicker, that their perfect logic usually suppressed. The fact that these primitive humans were even conceptualizing such a thing, touching upon a forgotten, suppressed aspect of Luminaris history, was disturbing. It contradicted their understanding of human intellectual limits. Designation: Anomaly of increased interest. Unit 517 updated. Assign higher monitoring priority to Subject Vance and associated activity. Continue harvest. The Luminaris did not see it as a direct threat. They saw it as a curious, almost irritating echo of a forgotten, inefficient path. A distraction. For now. Part 3. The Pitch. Skepticism and the Luminaris' growing alarm. Dr. Eli Vance burst onto the command deck, a wild look in his eyes, clutching a tarnished handheld mirror like a sacred artifact. His usually dust-coated jumpsuit was even more disheveled, and his hair, usually merely unruly, now stood on end. The few officers present, looking gaunt and haunted by the unseen psionic pressure, stared at him in startled silence. "Commander Reed, I have it." Eli's voice cracked with a mixture of excitement and exhaustion. He held up the mirror, its surface flickering with the emergency lights. "The solution! It's mirrors!" Commander Evelyn Reed, who had been hunched over a flickering tactical screen, slowly turned. Her eyes, usually sharp and focused, were dull with fatigue and a deep-seated despair. She looked at Eli, then at the mirror, and then back at Eli as if he had finally lost his mind. "Mirrors, Dr. Vance?" she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Are you suggesting we polish our way out of this? Our psionic dampeners exploded, our AI crashed, and you bring me a looking-glass?" A low, humorless chuckle rippled through the small group of officers. Lieutenant Lena Rostova, her face pale, managed a weak grin. "Are you sure you haven't been spending too much time with the vintage tech, Doctor? Perhaps the Luminaris have finally gotten to you." Eli, undeterred, took a step forward. "No. Think about it. Their energy. It's a wave. Like light, like sound. It penetrates our minds. It reflects in our thoughts. If it behaves like other energies, it can be reflected by physical surfaces. Specifically, by mirrors." He moved to a console, frantically tapping the screen. "If we position them precisely, we can create a feedback loop. Their own psionic energy, reflected and amplified, sent right back into their own minds. It's a psychic echo chamber. Their power becomes their poison." Evelyn stared at him, then at the map showing the silent, unmoving Luminaris fleet, a constant crushing presence in their minds. Every high-tech solution had failed spectacularly, leaving them exposed and dying. The idea was absurd. It flew in the face of every known principle of psionics. Yet, in her desperation, she saw a flicker of the same wild conviction that had driven the earliest, most impossible human endeavors. She had no other options. "Dr. Vance," Evelyn said slowly, her voice regaining a fraction of its command. "Are you absolutely certain this isn't some delusion?" "It's a hypothesis, Commander," Eli corrected, his eyes burning with conviction. "An untested, highly unconventional hypothesis. But it's based on observable principles of energy reflection, applied to a new medium, and it's the only thing we haven't lost to their attacks. It's too simple for their advanced sensors to even register as a threat." Evelyn closed her eyes for a brief moment, a heavy sigh escaping her lips. "Very well, Dr. Vance. You have Fort Echo's complete cooperation. Every available hand is at your disposal. You want mirrors? Go find every reflective surface on this outpost. But if this fails, if this is a waste of our last precious resources and time, then we truly have nothing left." Eli moved with a renewed, almost manic energy. He was given a dedicated team, initially skeptical and physically drained, but driven by Commander Reed's rare, desperate order. Their first task: scavenge for every reflective surface they could find on Fort Echo. The outpost, once a marvel of efficiency, became a bizarre salvage yard. Eli led his team through forgotten storage lockers, disused labs, and even the crew's personal quarters. They didn't just collect traditional mirrors. They gathered highly polished sheets of durasteel from old bulkheads, kitchenware like gleaming stainless steel pots and reflective trays, the shiny inner lining of discarded server racks, and even the broken shards of solar panels from a disused array, carefully prying the reflective surfaces free. Eli, ever the quirky engineer, found a surprising amount of discarded compact mirrors and makeup palettes from the personal effects of long-gone crew. His lab and the adjacent warehouse rapidly transformed into a palace of mirrors, every available surface shimmering, reflecting the dim emergency lights into a chaotic kaleidoscope of brilliance. "Remember," Eli instructed his team, his voice filled with an almost childlike enthusiasm. "It's not just about collecting them, it's about reflectivity. Polish them. Every scratch, every speck of dust, diminishes their power, and angle is everything." Designing the psionic reflection matrix was a monumental task. This wasn't about randomly hanging mirrors. Eli worked tirelessly, surrounded by complex geometric diagrams and laser pointers. He calculated precise angles for each reflective surface, aiming to create a complex internal network of bounces that would concentrate and redirect the psionic energy. He used his quirky, custom-built optical tools and a lifetime of understanding how light, and now, potentially, unseen energy, behaved. The plan was to create a series of layered, multi-directional reflection chambers within the outpost's core command and residential areas, turning Fort Echo itself into a giant, psionic funhouse. As Eli and his team began to physically gather and arrange the reflective materials, the Luminaris Collective Consciousness, CPU, registered a series of new, increasingly perplexing energy signatures emanating from Fort Echo. These weren't chaotic human thoughts, nor were they distress signals. They were patterns of physical manipulation of highly reflective surfaces, generating subtle, localized distortions in the ambient psionic field. Analysis update. Primitive physical constructs manifesting localized psionic field distortions. A processor relayed its telepathic thought tinged with what, in a lesser species, might be called irritation. Correlation to chaotic resonance protocols. ERA 7 has reached 0.012%, another unit reported, a flicker of historical data appearing briefly in the collective's visual cortex. Fragmented images of ancient Luminaris experiments ending in self-inflicted chaos. This was deeply unsettling. Their ancestors had discarded this knowledge as too dangerous, too inefficient, too unpredictable. Logical inconsistency. Primitive species engaging in construction of an unstable reflective network, a central unit projected. Prioritized threat assessment update required. This contradicts established parameters of human technological advancement. A heated internal debate, expressed as rapid-fire calculations and cascading subroutines, ensued within the Luminaris collective. Some units argued for immediate, overwhelming psionic assault to prevent further development of this, primitive yet familiar, threat. Others, bound by their strict logical protocols, argued that such a crude method could not possibly pose a significant threat, and that a full-scale assault would be inefficient and waste valuable psychic resources. Request for targeted elimination of subject Vance due to heightened threat probability, a tactical unit suggested. Protocol violation. Direct individual targeting against non-combatant primitive requires re-evaluation, the central CPU countered. Such a localized action carries logical inefficiencies, given overall harvest objective. Monitor and prepare counter-strategies for reflection anomaly. The Luminaris did not see it as a direct threat. They saw it as a curious, almost irritating echo of a forgotten, inefficient path. A distraction. For now. Part 4. Installation under fire and the shadow of knowledge. The operation to install the psionic reflection matrix transformed Fort Echo into a frantic, perilous construction site. Every surviving able-bodied crew member, their faces etched with hunger and the lingering psychic drain, was repurposed for Eli's project. The task was brutal. The Luminaris' psionic pressure, though less intense than the initial assault, remained a constant, insidious threat. It manifested as sudden, disorienting flashes of light in the periphery, phantom screams echoing just beyond hearing, or moments of profound disorienting vertigo that could send a worker plummeting from a high scaffold. Angles, precision is everything, Dr. Eli Vance bellowed, his voice raw but unwavering. as he directed a team struggling to mount a large, polished steel panel onto a reinforced bulkhead. Sweat beaded on his brow, mingling with the ever-present dust. He moved with a manic energy, adjusting laser pointers, checking his intricate geometric diagrams, and making micro-adjustments with a custom-built optical calibrator that looked like a steampunk kaleidoscope. His obsessive attention to detail, once dismissed as eccentricity, was now their only hope. One young engineer, Private Lena Rostova, swayed precariously on a scaffold, clutching her head as a wave of paranoid whispers washed over her. "They're in my head. They know what we're doing," she cried out, almost dropping a crucial mirror shard. "Fight it, Rostova," Eli yelled, his voice cutting through the mental noise. "It's a trick. They want you to drop it, focus on the reflection, see the light, that's what you need." The installation was a dance with desperation. Each section of the outpost required a unique arrangement of mirrors and reflective surfaces, creating a multi-layered labyrinth of bounces. Sometimes, a poorly aligned mirror would inadvertently reflect a stray psionic pulse, causing a localized flare-up of mental distortion, temporarily sending a small area into chaos. Eli would rush in, quickly recalibrating, mumbling to himself about unpredictable resonance patterns. These near disasters, while terrifying, ironically served to reinforce Eli's theory: the psionic energy was reacting to the physical surfaces. Commander Evelyn Reed observed the chaos from a secure comms booth, her face grim. She saw the exhaustion, the fear, but also a new, fragile determination in her crew. Eli, seemingly immune to the worst of the psychic attacks due to his singular focus, was a whirlwind of activity, his quirky methods proving surprisingly effective. He'd use an ancient plumbob to ensure vertical alignment, then a repurposed surveying telescope for perfect horizontal angles, humming tunelessly the entire time. His mind, so deeply immersed in the complex physics of light and reflection, seemed to filter out the mental assaults, or perhaps his very unconventional thought processes made him an unsuitable target for the Luminaris' precise mental attacks. "They're making progress, Commander," Dr. Ben Carter reported, looking surprisingly hopeful. "Mental breakdowns are still occurring, but the overall rate has slowed since the reflective surfaces started going up. It's almost like it's scattering the ambient psionic pressure." Evelyn watched a large circular mirror, salvaged from a defunct telescope, being hoisted into place at a critical junction. Its polished surface gleamed, reflecting the harsh utility lights. The Luminaris were still out there, a silent, unseen threat, their presence a constant pressure on every mind within Fort Echo. But now, for the first time since the attack began, Evelyn felt a faint, unfamiliar flicker within herself. It wasn't confidence, not yet. It was hope. A crazy, desperate hope, born from the most unlikely of materials and the most eccentric of minds. The Palace of Mirrors was almost complete, waiting for the enemy to unleash its full power one last time. The Luminaris Collective Consciousness, CPU, was no longer serene. The reflection anomaly, originating from Fort Echo, was escalating in its complexity and unpredictability. The humans had completed a significant portion of their reflective matrix, and the subtle psionic disturbances it generated were becoming undeniable. Analysis: human construction of reflective resonation network is 78% complete. Distortion field integrity, increasing rapidly, a processing unit relayed, its telepathic thought tinged with what, in a lesser species, might be called irritation. Correlation to chaotic resonance protocols. Era 7 has reached 0.05%, another unit reported, a flicker of historical data appearing briefly in the collective's visual cortex. Fragmented images of ancient Luminaris experiments ending in self-inflicted chaos. This was deeply unsettling. Their ancestors had discarded this knowledge as too dangerous, too inefficient, too unpredictable. Initiate targeted psionic probes. Objective: identify and exploit systemic vulnerabilities within human reflective network, the central CPU commanded. The Luminaris sent focused, precise psionic pulses towards Fort Echo, not as a full-scale assault, but as calculated tests. These probes were designed to find flaws in Eli's geometry, to overload individual mirrors, or to induce specific resonant frequencies that would break the reflection chain. On Fort Echo, these probes manifested as sudden, terrifying spikes in psionic activity, in localized areas. One moment, a corridor would be calm, the next, a crew member would collapse, convulsing, or a section of the newly installed mirrors would vibrate violently, emitting a sickening, high-pitched whine. Eli, responding with frantic precision, would rush to recalibrate, making micro-adjustments that countered the Luminaris' targeted attacks. "They're trying to break the circuit, Commander," Eli shouted to Evelyn over the comms, wiping sweat from his brow. "They're not just attacking randomly, they're testing it." "Like they know what this is?" Evelyn's eyes widened. "They know." The idea was chilling. It meant their enemy wasn't just powerful, it was intelligent, perhaps even familiar with Eli's absurd theory. This wasn't a desperate last stand against an unknown force anymore. It was a chess match against an adversary that seemed to anticipate their moves. Within Concordance Prime, the Luminaris Collective observed the humans' frantic, yet strangely effective, adjustments. Subject Vance demonstrating anomalous adaptive capabilities. Network stability maintained despite targeted probes, a unit calculated. Probability of network disruption, decreasing. The alarm within the collective deepened. The humans, through their crude, illogical method, were effectively countering their highly refined probes. It was an affront to their perfect logic, a disturbing echo of a forgotten, chaotic past that was now, inexplicably, manifesting before them. The reflection anomaly was becoming a significant and increasingly unsettling factor. Part 5. The loop's activation, and the Luminaris' ancient fear resurfaces. The air on Fort Echo's command deck crackled with a new kind of tension, a terrifying quiet. For the past 2 days, the pervasive psionic hum of the Luminaris had gone silent. It wasn't a reprieve. It was the calm before the storm. Commander Evelyn Reed, still gripping the console, felt the last vestiges of the mental pressure recede from her mind. Lieutenant Lena Rostova, her face grim but resolute, was already moving, relaying new, astonishing data. "Any movement," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "No visual, no energy spike yet," Lena replied, her voice tight. "But the ambient psionic pressure is rising. It feels like a wall of thought is building." Suddenly, it hit. Not a physical impact, but a crushing, overwhelming wave of pure mental energy. It slammed into Fort Echo like an invisible hammer. This wasn't the subtle dread or scattered whispers of before. This was a unified, devastating psychic force, meant to annihilate every mind within the outpost. Even through the protection of the newly installed mirrors, Evelyn felt her own mind buckle, a searing pain lancing through her skull, threatening to pull her consciousness apart. Lena screamed, clutching her head, blood trickling from her nose. Dr. Ben Carter, already tending to a convulsing technician, fought to remain upright. But this time, something was different. As the Luminaris' colossal psionic wave flooded into Fort Echo, it met the gleaming surfaces of Eli's psionic reflection matrix. The energy, instead of penetrating directly, struck the carefully angled mirrors. A strange, unseen ripple effect began. The psionic force, like light in a hall of mirrors, began to bounce, reflect, and amplify within the confined spaces of the outpost. It didn't dissipate. It intensified, ricocheting off each perfectly calibrated surface, gathering momentum, becoming a chaotic, self-propagating storm of raw mental energy. Then, the unimaginable happened. This chaotic, amplified psionic storm, unable to escape the closed system, was forced back along the very pathways it had entered. It slammed back into its source, the minds of the Luminaris themselves. Within the vast crystalline network of the Luminaris Collective Consciousness, CPU, the response to the final, devastating psionic attack was not victory, but immediate, catastrophic failure. Undefined energy return source, a synthetic alarmed thought shrieked through the Luminaris' telepathic network, reflected psychic resonance, origin, self, data, illogical. Illogical, ancient chaotic protocol overload. The collective central processing units, designed for absolute efficiency and perfect logic, began to fracture. The correlation to chaotic resonance protocols Era 7 didn't just flash on a screen, it erupted within their shared consciousness, overriding all other data. Fragmented, terrifying memories from their deep past, images of their own ancestors' disastrous experiments with similar, untamed reflective energies, leading to widespread mental instability and societal disruption, flashed through the minds of millions of Luminaris. It wasn't just a data anomaly, it was a deep-seated, institutionalized trauma, a primal fear rooted in their collective memory. Feedback loop detected. Self-inflicted psionic overload. Primary minds experiencing critical cascade. Forbidden resonance. Another distressed thought echoed, laced with something akin to panic. The Luminaris, beings whose very existence was rooted in the perfect logical flow of psychic energy, were now being overwhelmed by their own amplified power, tainted by the very chaos they had discarded. What they intended as a precise, devastating strike had become a weapon of self-destruction. Holographic projections of neural pathways within Concordance Prime flickered wildly, then pulsed with alarming, self-destructive patterns. Individual Luminaris commanders, usually serene and unified, began to writhe, their crystalline bodies glowing erratically, their telepathic communication dissolving into incoherent psychic screams. Their minds, overstimulated by their own reflected power and the resurgence of ancient dread, were overloading. Their elegant psychic forms contorted, reflecting their inner torment. The effect was horrifyingly effective. The massive psionic wave attacking Fort Echo suddenly fractured, losing cohesion. On the ground, the excruciating mental pressure on the human crew lessened, then became a chaotic, fluctuating torment as the Luminaris themselves struggled. Screams of agony echoed faintly through the Luminaris' own network, reaching human comms as garbled, distressed frequencies. Luminaris ships, once perfectly aligned, began to drift erratically. Some plunged randomly into the Martian atmosphere, others collided silently with their own kind. Their mind control backfired spectacularly. Some Luminaris beings were now attacking their own brethren, driven mad by the reflection of their power and their deep-seated collective trauma. On Fort Echo's command deck, the pain in Evelyn's head subsided to a dull throb. Lena Rostova, gasping for breath, looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and dawning comprehension. It's breaking up. The attack is weakening. They're turning on each other. Eli Vance, a triumphant, almost manic grin spreading across his dusty face, pumped his fist in the air. It worked! The loop! They can't compute it. Their own logic is devouring them. And something else. Something ancient. He could sense the sudden, profound fear emanating from the Luminaris now. A raw, desperate emotion that was entirely new. The Palace of Mirrors, Fort Echo's most absurd defense, had just turned the tide. The unseen enemy, masters of the mind, were now victims of their own devastating, illogical reflection, reawakening a hidden terror from their own collective past. Part 6. Victory of Adaptability and the Lingering Shadow. The tide had turned. On Fort Echo's bridge, the air, once thick with despair, now vibrated with a raw, electric surge of hope. The Luminaris' psionic assault had splintered, their once unified mental force now a cacophony of chaotic, self-inflicted screams, echoing across the void. Commander Evelyn Reed, still gripping the console, felt the last vestiges of the mental pressure recede from her mind. Lieutenant Lena Rostova, her face grim but resolute, was already moving, relaying new, astonishing data. Commander, their energy output is erratic. Ships are drifting. Some are colliding with each other, Lena exclaimed, her voice filled with incredulous awe. Their internal comms are nothing but high-frequency chaos. They're in disarray. Dr. Eli Vance, his face streaked with grease and triumphant grime, pumped his fist in the air. It worked! The loop! They can't compute it! Their own logic is devouring them, and something else. Something ancient. He could still feel the echoes of their panic. A raw, almost primitive fear that shocked him. Evelyn didn't hesitate. This was the opening they had prayed for. All active turrets. Target the nearest Luminaris vessels. Fire on my command. Her voice, clear and commanding once more, cut through the residual tension on the bridge. Dr. Vance, confirm the matrix holds. Holding steady, Commander. Every reflection is driving them deeper into their own cognitive nightmare. Eli practically sang, watching his complex improvised system hum with unseen energy. Then fire! Evelyn roared. Fort Echo's automated turrets, once useless against the unseen enemy, roared to life. Plasma bolts streaked across the black, followed by the concussive force of kinetic rounds. The Luminaris vessels, disoriented and crippled by their own self-inflicted psionic overload and deep-seated terror, were slow to react. Shields flickered erratically, unable to maintain cohesion under the mental assault. Ship after ship, once untouchable, now took direct hits, exploding in silent, violent bursts of light. Humanity was finally hitting back, not with superior firepower, but with a weapon forged from desperation and illogical ingenuity. Within the Concordance Prime, the Luminaris Collective Consciousness, CPU, was in full retreat, its logical processing crumbling under the weight of the self-inflicted chaos and the reawakened historical trauma. Unresolvable anomaly, primal resonance pattern detected, collective integrity compromised. Reinitiate suppression protocols. Era 7. Failure. Retreat. Immediate withdrawal. The final command was not a calculated strategic move, but an urgent, almost desperate, flight from a phenomenon they had deemed too dangerous to exist. The Luminaris vessels, obeying the broken will of their collective, disengaged erratically, flickering out of existence as they warped away, leaving behind a debris field of their shattered brethren. They hadn't been defeated by brute force, but by a fundamental, existential paradox that rendered their entire philosophy of warfare null and void. Their own ancient suppressed knowledge, reflected back at them by a primitive species, had undone them. In the weeks that followed, Fort Echo began its slow, arduous recovery. The scars of the psionic attack ran deep, but the medical bay, under Dr. Ben Carter's tireless efforts, began to heal the shattered minds. The outpost was quickly reinforced, but not just with new durasteel. Eli's psionic reflection matrix became a permanent, foundational part of Fort Echo's defense. Every new section, every critical junction, was now lined with carefully angled, highly polished reflective surfaces, the mirror walls that would forever protect them. Other human outposts quickly adopted the Vance protocols, implementing similar reflection-based defenses. Humanity, once defined by its pursuit of advanced technology, now embraced a newfound appreciation for the elegantly simple. Dr. Eli Vance, once the eccentric Dusty sidelined to the warehouse, was now celebrated as a genius. He still preferred the quiet of his lab, now bustling with eager new recruits. His ancient knowledge, his unconventional thinking, and his profound understanding of overlooked principles were now revered. A new division, the Institute of Reflective Defenses, was quickly established, solely dedicated to exploring analog and psionic reflection technologies. One afternoon, Commander Evelyn Reed found Eli in his gleaming, mirror-filled lab, meticulously polishing a small shard of reflective steel. "Dr. Vance," Evelyn said, a rare, genuine smile gracing her lips. "You saved us all. You truly did." Eli looked up, his glasses glinting in the reflected light. "We didn't beat them with our biggest guns, Commander. We beat them by showing them themselves. By giving them a reflection they couldn't process." He paused, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. Though their reaction was more extreme than pure logical failure, it felt like panic. Like they recognized it. Evelyn's smile faded, her gaze distant. "I noticed it too, that final transmission. Primal resonance pattern detected." She looked at Eli, a chilling realization dawning on her. "You said your idea was too simple for them to register as a threat. But what if it wasn't? What if it was too simple, yet too familiar?" Eli nodded slowly, a new, unsettling understanding settling over him. Their entire system broke down. Not just from overload, but from something deeper. "Commander, I think we didn't just find their weakness. I think we stumbled onto a forbidden chapter of their own history. They had some version of this, dismissed it, buried it, and we just dug it up and threw it back at them." Evelyn gave a grim nod. "Then our victory isn't just about defense. It's about a fundamental challenge to their very being. They thought our mental weakness would be our downfall. But you used their own strength, their own minds, against them. And in doing so, you've shown them a reflection of their own suppressed past. That makes them more dangerous now, Eli. We've shown them what they fear most about themselves. Eli gave a grim nod. Exactly. Turns out the most powerful weapon in the universe might just be a mirror. Now, the next time they look for a fight, they'll be seeing double, both their reflection and their past. Humanity had learned a vital lesson. True strength lay not just in advanced technology, but in adaptability, in finding ingenious solutions in the most unexpected places, and in understanding that sometimes the simplest answer can break the most complex of foes. They had faced the unseen, and they had turned its own power back upon itself, securing a future through reflection, but also unlocking a dangerous secret about their enemy.